Hi, and welcome to the Modern Persian Food podcast. We are food bloggers,
Bita Arabian
and Bita Nazem Kelley, and we're here to share with you the rich flavors and fresh ingredients of Persian cooking and how to incorporate them into today's modern lifestyles.
We're excited to introduce you to the flavors, tastes, and techniques we use, and also our own cultural stories and perspectives growing up in the U.S. in a Persian family. Thank you for joining us. Hi, welcome to episode 81. Today we have a special guest. She is an artiste, a boss babe, a food creator, so many things. Our special guest is Parisa Parnian. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Bita and Beata. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for taking such a great stab at saying my name.
How did I do?
You did great. My grandmother and all of my Iranian ancestors would very much be proud of your pronunciation. Here in the U.S., most people are more comfortable saying Parisa Parnian, kind of like pizza parmesan.
Oh.
But if you can say Parisa Parnian, go for it. That's all I got to say about that.
Awesome. Hi, Parisa. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
For people who don't know you, your alias is Savage Taste, and you also have another brand, Savage Muse.
Yes, and that does create a little bit of confusion. People keep telling me, why don't you just have one Instagram handle? And it's because Savage Muse started before Savage Taste. It's my official art and illustration design studio because I'm actually a professional visual artist and designer. And then Savage Taste became a spin-off when I started to do work as a culinary creative using food, design, art, and storytelling to build bridges and connect communities. But now I'm much more active on Savage Taste because that world encompasses everything I'm doing these days.
We have so much to unpackage and to touch on.
Yeah, so we've been following you forever, it feels like, and finally we have the opportunity to have you on our show and also share about you with our listeners so everyone knows the great person that you are and all of the really awesome things you're doing. Most notably that I want to just call out right from the start, all three of us are wearing the Make Tahdig Not War shirts that you have created. So this is like a whole movement.
Yes.
It feels like. So tell us a little bit about it. Like, how did you start it? What it means?
First of all, for those of you who can't see, I have two hot Persian women who are really making my Make Tahdig Not War t-shirt look extra yummy today.
Woo-hoo!
Get that Persian, get that Tahdig pride, get that pro-love, pro-peace vibe out. So yeah, funny story. The Make Tahdig Not War t-shirt came about when I was asked to be on a cooking show called Taste Made TV, and there's a cooking show called Make This Tonight, and they asked me to come on and do 4 episodes where within each episode I created dishes based on some true stories of my life. And one episode was of course going to be about tahdig. And the night before, just to give you a little bit of chronological context, it was January of 2020, right before the pandemic, and our former president was being called to be impeached. And lo and behold, at the exact same time, suddenly Iran became an issue again. All of a sudden, there was all this attention on, we need to do something about Iran. We need to do something about nuclear weapons. All that stuff came up again. It was like a shiny penny. And so that was the month when there was a little bit of whispers of, oh, great, is Iran, going to become another issue again with the U.S.? So the night before my cooking show, I was like, you know what? I want to wear something tomorrow when I'm making tahdig that kind of is a statement. Because, listen, for a lot of us who are either Iranian born like me, Iranian immigrant, or first, second generation Iranian, you've been through it. You know what it's like to get targeted. And I was here when the Iran hostage crisis happened in the late 70s. I remember how it felt to be Iranian at that time. I remember what it felt like to be Iranian or probably from all parts of the Middle East after 9/11. And so the fact that the former president was starting to focus again on Iran, it just felt a little intense for me. So I'm like, what can I do to give a message that there's a better way and that at this point in our lives, we're such a global community, and so many of us actually benefit from the cultures of even the countries we're suspicious of. You know, who doesn't love tahdig? So I was like, you know, what slogan can I make to wear on the show tomorrow? Because it's the US audience that's going to see this. So I'm like, you know what? How about make Tahdig Not War? And for me, there was different levels of sentiment to it. First of all, there's a lot of conversations about how people from cultures that historically have colonized other cultures might love their food, enjoy their food, celebrate their food, but not necessarily love and celebrate the people of a culture. And so on one level, I wanted to use tahdig as an example of how sometimes cultures and communities can be suspicious of or fearful of other communities because they just don't know them. And I use tahdig as an example because I'm like, how could you want to go to war with someone if you were to sit down and break tahdig with them? And it's like breaking bread, right? It's that same symbolism. So on one hand, I wanted to make it a message of let's put aside our fearfulness of countries and cultures we don't know about and instead connect over food and learn about each other. The other aspect of the sentiment of the Make Tahdig Not War t-shirt is that there's always jokes about how there's not enough tahdig to go around at the family table. And it's like, fighting for that last piece of tahdig, you know, you're fighting for it. So the other part of this sentiment is let's all share the tahdig, and there's enough to go around for everybody. So those are kind of the intentions behind it. I didn't realize once I wore it on the show and posted a picture of myself, like a behind the scene picture of the cooking show on my Instagram, that this message would resonate with so many people. Of course, it resonated with a lot of the Iranian diaspora, but it also resonated with people of other cultures who might be allies to Iranians, people in the food world, cooks, chefs. It just became more of a sentiment. You know, honestly, today, you could say make borscht not war, and it would be very relevant to what's happening today, you know? So it turned into its own thing where people started asking me where they could get the t-shirts. So I'm like, I guess I should print some. So now it's available in my online shop. And within a month of me coming up with it, I started getting people I didn't know sending me pictures of themselves, selfies, wearing it, holding a tahdig, making tahdig and wearing the t-shirt. And I would like repost their pictures, and it just snowballed and it created community. Like, I think a lot of the people that I'm now connected with on my Savage Taste IG, it's because of the Make Tahdig Not War t-shirt. It just brought a lot of people together. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I think it's a hashtag. At least I use it as a hashtag. And it has brought me in touch with other people with common mission and passion, which is bridging the cultural gaps through food. And it definitely has helped me feel energized and empowered. And so thank you. And I appreciate what you're doing with like resharing. And I just love the community that we're in. Just make tahdig. I'm going to make some today.
How delicious. Also, I don't know if either of you have worn your Make Tahdig Not War t-shirt out and about, but I find that I get a lot of interaction with people who either know what tahdig is and are like, oh my God, yes, or they're Iranian, and it makes them so happy to have some sort of visibility and representation out in the world, you know, or if they have no idea what tahdig is, but they understand the whole make, fill in the blank, not war concept, they'll start talking like, what's tahdig? What does this mean? And it's like a really great way to engage with people, I've found.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. I love wearing mine. I'm also at the point where I'm like, I don't want to wear it too much because it's one of the shirts that I really like. So I'm trying to keep it nice and pristine.
Very nice.
But I do love it. So thank you so much for, you know, introducing everyone to this concept and also sharing all of that information with us. It's like so lovely to hear the background and how it came to fruition. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, you are involved in so many things. There are lots of components to your intelligence and strength, but I think ultimately you're a creator. I do find artists to have a very high level of intelligence. And
why, thank you.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this conversation because I just have so many questions. For example, What is this tie-in with what I see as like maybe the Mexican culture? I've looked through your art. I am very drawn to it.
Thank you.
I see some Frida Kahlo. I see jungly. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that connection. What's that about?
Good question. So I was born in Iran and my family immigrated to the US when I was just 4 years old in the 70s. We chose Arizona in the Southwest as where we set down roots. And it's only because in all of the US, really, my parents only like knew two people. My mom had a childhood friend who lived in Arizona. So that's where we went. My family had no idea what Arizona was like. Well, as we all know, Arizona is on the border of Mexico. It's heavily influenced by Mexican and Latin American culture. Although growing up in Arizona, there's such a huge class difference between Mexican immigrants and Persian immigrants, as you can imagine, that it wasn't like, oh, the reason I'm connected to Mexican culture is because like there were all these Mexican families living in my neighborhood. No. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a predominantly white, upper middle class, Republican, very conservative area. And the Persian community was all mostly white collar, highly educated, moneyed people. And the Mexican culture was considered more like working class and all of that. So there was a definite class gap. And growing up, I wasn't really thinking about any connections between Persian and Mexican culture. When it was time in high school to choose a language to learn, the handful of Persians who actually lived and the Iranians who lived in Arizona at the time who were my age, most of them chose French, not all of them, but French is a more desirable culture and language traditionally for Persians. But I felt a really strong need to learn Spanish because I saw around me that was a huge influence in my world. So I started taking a lot of Spanish classes and became fluent. And my foray into Spanish culture actually was in Spain, not in Latin America or Mexico. I spent a lot of time in Spain and fell in love with that culture as well, because obviously it's got such a rich history connected with the Moorish and Arab and Middle Eastern culture as well. So there was a kindred connection there. My interest and connection with specifically Mexican culture did not happen until I moved to California and to Los Angeles in 2010. At the time, I was a full-time corporate fashion designer. I became one of the senior level menswear designers for Guess, the denim label. And in the LA fashion world, fashion industry, a huge percentage of the workers and population who work in the garment industry are Mexican. And my Spanish came in really handy in the workforce, in the workplace. Culturally, my connection to Mexico and Latin America grew as my brother and my cousin, who herself is an amazing chef, shout out to Mahfamjun of Mingle and Graze in Arizona. A lot of my relatives started marrying Latin Americans. My sister-in-law, my brother's wife, is Colombian. Hola, Carolina. My cousin's husband is from Chile. And many other people in my family started partnering or marrying or dating people from Latin cultures. And I start to see there's such a connection. You know, yes, the religious connections are different. There's like certain aspects that are very different, especially like in certain aspects of the cuisine. Like there's like no heat. There's no peppers and spice in Persian food, you know. But our spiciness comes in other forms now, doesn't it, ladies?
It sure does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're spicy. We're spicy. Just not with the chile. You know what I mean?
We're spicy with the dance moves, with the hip action and the shoulders.
Oh, girl, the shimmy. Basically, here's what happened. By the time I got to LA, I mean, let's face it, LA, two of the largest immigrant populations are Iranians and, hello, Mexicans. California, another state that borders Mexico. And I've always lived on the east side of LA, which is heavily a Mexican and Latin American immigrant established and populated. So my world has always been this interesting blend where my roots, my heritage is from bougie bitch Persia, but I always have lived in the artist, bohemian / like Latin immigrant neighborhoods and barrios. Doesn't matter where, you know, in what part of the US I've lived in. that seems to be the vibe, you know? There might be like a high-end boutique or like Michelin restaurant next to an old mom and pop like Mexican shoe repair shop or Botanica, you know? So these vibes were always happening for me. And then life happened. And let me tell you, sometimes when life happens and it throws lemons your way, you got to make lemonade. Or in my case, rose-watered margaritas.
There you go.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Yes,
now
yes,
we're talking.
rose-watered margaritas. So what happened is in 2019, the summer of 2019, the beautiful rent-control 2-bedroom place I had in like one of the most hoppin' East Side neighborhood, Silver Lake, LA, where I'd had for a decade, where I threw my very renowned Persian supper and salon pop-up dinners, where I had a garage that I converted into my art studio. I was living the life. I was living the life of a self-employed creative who could actually afford rent because it was rent control. Well, my utopia came to a crash when the building got sold.
Oh, no.
And the new owners were able to legally evict all of us, legally. But I found myself in the summer of 2019 having established a very sustainable life as a self-employed creative because my rent wasn't crazy. And because I was able to use my live workspace to do all the things I do. And suddenly that's taken away from me. And with my budget for rent in current LA, I could afford a bedroom in a house. That's it. Well, when you're trying to grow your food culture empire out of a bedroom in LA, that's not really going to cut it. And so I had two choices. I could sign a lease and live in a tiny bedroom, or I could put all my stuff in storage and figure it out. And so I decided to put all my stuff in storage. And I had this very strong voice that told me, you have to go to Mexico City.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'd never been there before. I didn't even know what this town layout was. Not town, it's a huge city.
Right.
But my voice is like, go to Mexico City. Also, one of your muses from Savage Muse, which is my original art studio, is Frida Kahlo. Go to her place. You know, you got to go visit Casa Azul. You got to see where Frida, you know, spent the last years of her life, her magical years. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to my intuition. With what I could pay for rent in LA, I could live very well in Mexico City. So let me go. So I went and I was there for several months. And during that time, I had some like intuitive voices say, listen, I know you were only 4 when you left Tehran, but there's something about walking around Mexico City that feels like Tehran. Maybe pre-revolution Tehran, you know? There's a vibe here.
The energy.
There's an energy, the creativity, the architect design, the graphic design, the world of cinema, experimental movies, the chefs, what people are doing. Mexico City for me had and still has such a feeling of like what maybe I think 60s, early 70s Tehran was like, with the creative intellectuals, the designers, the nightlife people. That's the vibe I get. And I've been confirmed from people who've lived both of those lives that my hunch is not wrong. There is a vibe between Mexico City and Tehran. And as I was there, of course, I was eating my way through Mexico City, and I saw some interesting connections between Persian and Mexican food that I don't think most people think about. But, you know, mole sauce. Mole, which is the cacao-based renowned collection of sauces, usually a very dark brown, almost black, sometimes red. Boy, doesn't that look like fesenjun?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So good. It's got that same like soul satisfying, comfort, rich,
Earthy,
sultry,
a little bit of sweetness, a little like smokiness sometimes, a little vibe, you know? So I'm like, God, mole and fesenjun. And also both of them, I believe historically were served with turkey or like a duck or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of the seasoning and spices that are used in Mexican cooking is part of the, I mean, unfortunately, but is part of the way Mexico was colonized by the Spaniards. And, well, guess what? The Spaniards were heavily influenced by the Moors and the Arabs and by the Manasa communities, right? And so as I'm in Mexico City, I'm enjoying al pastor tacos and learning that al pastor, well, al is an Arabic, way to start a word. I learned that al pastor tacos were basically what happened when the Lebanese immigrants came to Mexico City, like way over 100 years ago, and brought their flour-based lavash and brought their shawarma and brought the shawarma techniques.
Yeah.
And that evolved into a pork-based shawarma, basically, on flour tortillas instead of corn tortillas. So as I was there, I was just getting so excited about seeing these connections that already were established between Mexican culture and some of the Lebanese and North African immigrant communities that had very much established themselves now as part of Mexico and Mexico City. But no one in Mexico City understood Persian food. Like, I started to get to know chefs and restaurant people, and I would be like, hey, I have some ideas. Like, what if you and I collaborated and made Persian tamales? I have some ideas for what that would look like. And no one understood Persian specific flavors like fenugreek, shambelila, which is the herb we use in ghormeh sabzi, which is like so iconic, right? As I was in Mexico City, I'm like, I know that no one else is seeing this, but I'm seeing a love affair between Persian and Mexican vibes, and I want to make that love affair happen. I want to make that baby, know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I come back to LA. I don't have my own place. I'm still kind of floating around doing some really cool projects, but like sort of couch surfing. Thank you all my friends who let me do that. And right around the time I was like, okay, maybe I need to set down roots again, the pandemic started. So like everybody else, I had to find a living situation that would work for me. I went and I stayed for 6 months in a family home, which occasionally my mom and dad would be there too. And we did some amazing cooking together and cooking videos. It was actually quite awesome. But like many people, I had to pivot because at that point, a lot of the projects and a lot of the cool collabs I was doing was around food and culture events, was around pop-up dinners. It was shooting TV shows, which, the pandemic, everything got shut down.
Right.
So like many people, I'm sitting at home going like, what can I do? And that's when I started to come up with my pandemic project, which has turned into something I'm taking very seriously now, which I was like, first I did the Frida Kahlo art to pay homage to Frida. And that piece of art has really resonated with a lot of people. I put Frida in the kitchen instead of the art studio, and she's wielding a knife, chef's knife, instead of her paintbrush. And for me, I was trying to make that statement of like, you can be a visual artist who can also be in the kitchen and work with food. Like those two worlds are not separate from each other. They can be very much together.
Absolutely.
At this point, I'd moved back to LA and found a really fantastic opportunity to get my own place as part of a very creative home compound with a dear friend of mine in Highland Park. She's an incredibly talented set designer and prop stylist. Shout out to Lauren. And she has this beautiful space. I was able to get my own piece of that space. I have my own apartment, but we have this amazing garage that's a creative workspace. I have that garage artistic environment again. And so being back in LA, being in Highland Park, which is heavily Mexican and Latinx, and trying to figure out how to create stuff with limited resources and limited space, I was like, I want to create my own spice blend. This is right when everyone is cooking at home. People who never thought they would be into cooking are getting crazy, creating TikTok videos. Like everyone is suddenly a cook, a chef. People are excited, and spices has become sexy again, So that's how I came up with my spice blend, which is called Perxican.
Yay!
Perxican.
So think Persian and Mexican. Perxican.
I love it. Perxican.
Clever.
And it was really important for me that these 11 spices and herbs, which I'll go into, would not only be highly delicious and functional and create an all-purpose seasoning that people from all different cultures and cooking levels and skill levels could use to really enhance the flavors of their everyday food. But I also wanted the fact that the spice bottle comes with every layer separate. It almost looks like sand art, but it also looks like these mountains in Iran.
Exactly. I was going to say that.
That look exactly like my spice bottle. It's these like layered, striated mountains where all the layers of color are in. It's beautiful. It's like these rainbow mountains. So there's homage to the homeland. And there's a reason it's in layers, not just because it looks pretty, but because I have a bigger message and a bigger platform with everything I do. It's always about the product and the designs, but it's also about the message behind it, right?
Yeah.
So with this, Perxican is what I hope to be and intend to be the beginning of like a whole line of layered spice blends that tell the story of how we are all layered people. That every layer of our lived experiences, in addition to the parts of us that are part of our ethnicity, our ancestry, but all of the lived experiences we have, who we love, where we live, where we travel, who our friends are, every single one of these adds a layer to our flavor.
I love that. That's beautiful.
And so for me, having these spice blends come in layers is a reminder that we are all truly, none of us is singular, none of us is one-dimensional. We're all layered people with our own stories and our own unique flavor. So Perxican is one of my stories. My hope and desire is when you're ready to shake that bottle and blend it so you can start cooking with it, I would love it if instead of you just taking your hand and shaking it, although that's perfectly fine, it would be so much more awesome if you put on your favorite song, especially if it's Persian or Mexican or Latin, and you full on did a full body shimmy.
Yeah.
And shake it. Like really shake it. Make this an interactive experience of joy. Bring out your sexy spice, shake it, blend that bottle, and then start cooking. That would be my dream.
I love it. That's so fun.
That's so fun. I don't even care what's in it. I just want to do that. Can you give us like a overview of what's in it or what it's good on or both?
So some of the spices in it that are iconic to Persian cuisine specifically are, again, the fenugreek leaves, not seeds, people, leaves.
Yeah.
Which we use in ghormeh sabzi, for example, which is like one of our iconic dishes. The other iconic one from Persian cooking is sumac.
Love it.
So those are two that are very specific, I would say, to Persian cuisine. One of the ingredients that's very specific to Mexican and South American cooking, but let's focus on Mexico, is ancho chile. It's a pepper, but it's on the milder side.
Right.
There's some ingredients in there that are crossover to both cultures, which is the point. So there's cumin, there's cilantro, there's parsley. I put a lot of turmeric in this spice blend because you need it. Like turmeric is so important when you're cooking a lot of things, especially a lot of Persian things. But there's also like smoked paprika and regular paprika and all these other yummy things that come together. I've had people who are South Asian tell me that it almost smells like a Persian Mexican masala, which is a type of spice blend. The taste is so aromatic and flavorful that it makes your everyday cooking elevated. What folks have been sending me pictures of or videos of their own cooking, one of the most popular ways to use it is on fish and shrimp and seafood, either to do it kind of like a rub or a sprinkle before you roast it in the oven, or if you're making like shrimp fish fajitas, fish tacos. But I use it for everything from a starter when you're creating the broth for soups and stews. Tastes amazing in chili. If you use the spice blend instead of whatever you would normally use in a traditional Persian khoresht or stew, you have to understand that the result is not going to taste like your grandmother's khoresht. Because the point is, you're taking something traditional and effing with it.
Yeah, you're making a modern version of it.
You're making a modern version. If you're going to use it in something that has a traditional recipe, expect it to taste a little different because that's the point.
Yeah.
But most people, including me, don't necessarily use it in ghormeh sabzi, right?
Sure.
I use it to take a regular stew or soup or scrambled eggs with veggies in the morning or roasted potatoes and roasted cauliflower or a stir fry or whatever I normally make, or salad dressing, or a labneh or sour cream yogurt dip, or popcorn, and I add this seasoning to it, and it just gives it its own fantastic flavor. So it's an all-purpose seasoning, and I encourage people to have fun with it and think of it as a replacement for the 12 spices you normally have to have access to in your kitchen. You can just have this bottle.
Sounds so delicious. And I love the visual that you were describing about the different layers. It reminds me of like the Persian spice markets in Iran, where you'll see like a big mountain of sorts of the spice in all different layers. And then they'll shave off like a vertical layer of that and mix it. So you're getting all those different spices all in one.
Advieh.
Yes.
Advieh. Yeah, exactly. Parisa Jun, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of the information about yourself, about your inspiration, and also how you've kind of paved the way for this generation of us, or these multiple generations who have a Persian background and are now living in a more blended environment. So thank you for all that you've done for our culture and our communities. Tell our listeners, where can people get more information about you and try the spice blend and hopefully get a shirt or something like that? What's the best way to get in contact?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm so thrilled and honored. I've been listening to your podcast pretty much from the time you launched it. And I recommend it to everyone, including some of the chef friends I have in Mexico City who are curious about Persian food, because you do such an excellent job of deep diving into all the ingredients, all the dishes. It's fantastic. All the holidays.
Thank you.
But to get back to your question, I have my savage_taste Instagram is my main hub, where a lot of the magic's happening, all the social engagement with amazing community. Perxican, if you're really specifically interested in the spice blend. And both of those Instagrams have my link tree with links to my online shop. If you want to see my website, it's savagemuse.com. And there I do some more like food memoir essays and do a little bit more food and art writing. And also my online shop is there as well.
All of the resources will be in links in our show notes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Modern Persian Food Podcast with Bita and Beata. Thanks for spending time with us. If you've enjoyed what you heard today, consider telling a friend or giving us a good rating. You can subscribe to our show for free on your favorite podcasting app, or find us online at modernpersianfood.com or on Instagram for the recipes and information we talked about today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and see you next time.